Dropping out of art school was the best business decision I've made in my career so far. She was covered in diamonds and she puts out her hand. She was like, I'm going to buy your company. Swung my leg over the motorcycle and promptly stepped in a pile of human shit. I had started a software company, raised VC money for it, but skipping through that would be not telling you the whole story. In this video, I'm going to share the 3 major life chapters that took me from art school dropout to entrepreneurial success. We're going to go into all the little details. I'm going to share all of the numbers. Let's go. When I was a kid, my dream was to be the most famous photographer in the world. I had already figured out by freshman year of high school what photography school I wanted to go to and had my heart set on it. I applied early, got in, and basically dicked around through most of high school because I wasn't going to need any of these things that they were teaching me. I was going to be the world's most famous photographer. So off I went to art school. And after 1 year, pretty quickly realized that school was just not for me. And I dropped out. After dropping out, I pretty much immediately moved to Los Angeles to pursue my dream of being this famous photographer, which of course never happened. And in the meantime, I was waiting tables and kind of eating ramen to get by. Now, the problem here wasn't that I was waiting tables and eating ramen to get by and trying to make my art happen. The real problem was that I was having a hell of a great time doing it. I was just having a blast. It was so much fun. I lived 2 blocks from the beach. Like, life felt pretty great. And that's when I had what I call my quarter life crisis. I had this realization that if I wasn't careful, I'd be 50 years old waiting tables and just doing the same thing, drinking too much, all the stuff that comes along with that fun lifestyle when you're young. And I knew that I wanted to have a family. I knew that I wanted to have nice things. I knew that I wanted a comfortable, stable life. And I knew that that wasn't the right way to get there. And so after reading a book, The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, if you haven't read it, highly recommend it. It served as a huge source of motivation for me at this pivotal time in my life. And I've come back to the principles in that book time and time again throughout my career. So I read The 4-Hour Workweek. I remember I was sitting at a coffee shop in Santa Monica, the Pete's at 14th in Montana, where I would go every morning and just try to figure out, like, what was I going to do with my life? And I'd read this book and I was like, you know what? I can figure out the internet. I'm young enough. I'm going to start reading TechCrunch. I'm going to start reading some of these, Hacker News, some of the techie blogs and news sources, and just figure out like software. I'm going to figure out how to start a software company. And so that's what I landed on. I decided pretty quickly that I needed to quit waiting tables. And I'd been fired in the past. I had quit in the past. It was a mess, a fun mess. So I called up my mom and I was like, I want to start a software company. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I need to move into the basement in order to do this, in order to have the financial runway and kind of headspace to focus on starting a company. Thankfully, I have a really supportive mom, and she said, come on home, let's do this. I moved into the basement, and I want to paint a picture here because sometimes when you think of a basement, it's furnished and has carpet and comfortable. Not this basement. This is a basement in Portland, Oregon, concrete floors, unfinished. It would flood with 2 inches of water, standing water, every winter. And my bed was just right there on top of all that mess. So at the end of the day, though, I'm so grateful that it was available to me because none of this would have been possible if I was still paying rent somewhere and had to worry about these life expenses on top of figuring out how to start a company. Within 6 months of moving into the basement, I had started a software company, raised VC money for it. I think I had raised a little over $500,000 initially, and I was able to move out of the basement. But skipping through that would be not telling you the whole story or not telling you the full truth. The reality was I spent a lot of time in coffee shops and tea shops around Portland, banging my head against the wall, like honestly crying sometimes, just like feeling really afraid, really scared that my fallback plan realistically was to go back to waiting tables. I wasn't qualified to even go work at the startups that were already mature and looking for people to join. I had no background in business, and so this had to work. And that's a really scary proposition. For any of you who are at the beginning of your journey, just know that you're not alone. We all have gone through that phase, and it's daunting. But at the end of the day, that's really what entrepreneurship is about. I've realized you go through these phases of either fear or burnout or imposter syndrome. And it's really how you push through those moments that define you as an entrepreneur. So after going through about 3 different business concepts, I landed on this idea that I should pick something that is as boring as possible so that I'm not competing with a bunch of Stanford grads who are also working on the same idea. So what did I land on? Contract management software. Now, don't jump out of your seat. I know it's very exciting, very, very exciting stuff. I was thrilled about it too at the time, but hey, I was just trying to kick my foot in the door. I saw this as a stepping stone and a way for me to get into the industry, to learn on the job, and to build some credibility so that I would be qualified to be in this space and feel welcome to build my next company. So we started this company. It was called Glider. Before that, it was called Superbly, and the legal name was Secure Document Technology Corporation, which is hilarious. We went through Techstars, which is a technology incubator. At the time, it was a really prestigious technology incubator. Today, I don't know. So we had grown the team. We had an office space. We'd finally started selling, but the reality was we hadn't gotten there fast enough. We had a bunch of technical setbacks. I was a first-time entrepreneur and a very green business operator, and I just hadn't gotten us to minimal sellable product fast enough. And so our investors were not super excited about writing that next check. So after some back and forth, it was becoming clear that we probably weren't going to be successful in raising this next round. And we scheduled a meeting in San Francisco that I was going to fly out for. So as you can imagine, I was not particularly stoked to have this meeting, but I knew I needed to have it. So I flew down to San Francisco and I did what any sane person would do, which is distract the shit out of myself waiting for this meeting. It just so happened that a big conference called Dreamforce, which is put on by Salesforce, was going on that week. And so I decided to take meetings because I would have been taking meetings had I not been facing shutting the company down. And it just so happened that someone from one of these much larger companies, been around for 30 years, had reached out to me, wanted to grab coffee. So I said, why not? Let's do it. And I met what I thought was one person for a casual coffee. When I arrived, the entire executive team of this company was lining the penthouse suite. They had it all catered. And here I was, in my startup tee with a blazer. And I don't know what came over me, but I just channeled all of the confidence that I probably shouldn't have had and pitched the living shit out of my company. I was like, we're doing great things. Here are our existing customers, our growth plans. I just really sold the vision that, I truly believed in, and ignored the fact that I thought that my next meeting would be about shutting the company down with our investors. So I left that meeting and went over to the True Ventures offices. And I have to give True a ton of kudos. They handled this better than I think anyone could have possibly handled it, or better than I would have expected anyone to handle it. They basically said, listen, we're going to back whatever your next thing is. Why don't we spin this one down? Let's give you enough money to make payroll for your employees through the holidays so that they have a nice long runway to find a new job. And we'll just be back off to the races with whatever your next thing is, but let's wind this one down. And so, I think I took it pretty well. I was expecting that conversation. I walked down the stairs. I was late for my flight, and this is where things get a little bit spicy. So my phone rings, and before the person has a chance to say anything, I'm like, I think it's my Uber driver. I'm like, I'm on my way down the stairs. I'll be there in a second. And the voice on the other line is like, Eli? We just met at the St. Regis or the W, I don't remember whatever hotel it was, fancy one. The chairman of our board wants to meet you. Can you come back? And I was like, listen, I'm late for my flight. I'll miss my flight if I go back. Sorry. And he's like, I really think that it's going to be worth your while. I really think you should come back. And so I don't know what came over me. I'd just been told the company was getting shut down. But for whatever reason, I said, sure, why not? I'll be there in a few minutes. So I asked my Uber driver to take me there instead of the airport. I show up and this woman is standing there head to toe in diamonds. Like, I've never seen someone dripped out to this level. I think that's what cool kids are saying now. Dripped out, dripping. I don't know. Let's not butcher that. Anyway, she was covered in diamonds and she puts out her hand. She was like, I'm whatever her name was, and I'm going to buy your company. And I don't know, again, what came over me. I just kept a straight face and I was like, well, it's not for sale. And she replied, "It will be by the time you land in Portland. We'll have an offer to you by the time you land." And that was it. I took an Uber, went to the airport, was kind of in a state of shock. I remember sitting on that airplane. I think I journaled at the time. It'd be really interesting to find that journal entry. Maybe I'll find it and read it or paste it on the screen or something like that. But anyway, it was a huge shock. And I remember reaching out to my investors, and obviously they were like, "What? This can't be real." But it was. And when I landed in Portland the next morning, I had an LOI for $4 million in my inbox. And so $4 million in cash when I was a majority owner was a meaningful, life-changing exit. And no, in the terms of Silicon Valley, this was not a slam dunk. This was not something that, TechCrunch was going to write about and everybody was going to, congratulate me on. But, didn't matter. It was life-changing for me, and people still congratulated me. People were still really excited that I was able to take something that wasn't going well and turn it into a win. So when I look back on this time, it's a time that I'm really proud of myself for sticking through it, seeing it through to this final outcome, and wrestling the beast that is selling your company to the mat. So I had just sold my first company. I had just turned 24. I actually think the transaction closed on my 24th birthday. What happened next? Well, I did what any sane 24-year-old would do, which was to go and buy the motorcycle of my dreams and drive it around the southwestern states, drive it down through all of Central America with my best friend, ultimately ending our trip in Panama. And I had the time of my life. It was something like 3.5 months of adventure and recharging my batteries. After going through the slog of building, selling it, I just needed space. I need space to recover. I know that, if you think about it on its face value, what do you mean recover? Like, you just made a bunch of money, but like, we're humans, and regardless, I was really, really burnt out. And this is a theme that crops back up for me time and time again, is these waves of burnout and getting through those waves of burnout to unlock whatever that next chapter of growth really is. So the trip ended, and I decided it was time to move to San Francisco to pursue my next startup thing. I had no idea what that was going to be, but I knew I wanted to do it in San Francisco. I'd always wanted to live there. And so I rode my motorcycle up to the bay and swung my leg over the motorcycle and promptly stepped in a pile of human shit, because it's San Francisco and that's what you do. Welcome to San Francisco. That's a true story, by the way. I threw the shoe away right away. I'm a bit of a germaphobe, and that was past my I'm going to clean this filter. So I'd love to say that I moved to San Francisco, figured out what my next startup idea was going to be, raised a bunch of money, and was off to the races. But that was so far from the truth that it would be a giant lie if I said that. So let's talk about what actually happened. After stepping in the pile of shit, I spent the next 6, 12 or so months going to coffee shops. There's a pattern here. Going to coffee shops, banging my head against the wall, feeling like a total loser. I was like, man, I'm this exited founder. I let it get to my head a little bit. I'm this exited founder. I should have an amazing idea. I should know what I'm doing, and I should be doing it. And no, I'm this loser having like 6 cappuccinos a day, writing in my moleskin notebook, trying to figure out what's next. What I've learned at this point is this is just part of the process. This is part of the journey, and you just have to roll with it. But at the time, I didn't really understand that. I didn't have that, I'd call that wisdom at this point, but hard-earned wisdom. And so I beat myself up a bunch. So around this time, there was a saying that kept echoing around my head, which was, and I'm going to butcher this, I don't know where it comes from, but something along the lines of, if you make your passion your work, you'll never work a day in your life. And I was like, man, I have the financial freedom to do something like that. I really should take this opportunity to shift what I'm focused on to something that I'm really passionate about, and everything's going to be groovy from there. Now, I have a ton of thoughts on that kind of theory. I think it's total bullshit. I'll do a whole video about why it's total bullshit. But at the time, thought that was the move. So it's like, what am I passionate about? I love motorcycles. And after a lot of back and forth and a lot of looking, I found an e-commerce motorcycle company to buy. So I reached out to the owner. Fast forward. I purchased this e-commerce motorcycle shop. And I'll do another episode all about what it's like to buy a business, what it's like to negotiate the sale, what it's like to take over. And for me, what it was like to take over, I was suddenly a warehouse worker. I had just bought myself a job. I had just bought myself a very interesting shift in career, and I was super excited about it. I was working in that warehouse until midnight every night, packing boxes, labeling boxes, shipping boxes, and I was just eating it up. It was fresh. It was new. I felt kind of like I did when I first moved to Portland, way back when, and was in my mom's basement. It was just a different version of that, from a much different life position. This e-commerce business ended up teaching me a ton of valuable lessons. And ultimately, 4 years later, after growing it, I sold it to a private equity firm. This was 2019. All the while I had been growing this business, I knew I wanted to keep one foot in the tech world. And so I had been serving as a marketing advisor to a bunch of different startups just to keep my brain fresh, to stay involved, to keep my connections with VCs. And after selling this e-commerce business, I was ready. I felt refreshed enough to go back to the world of venture-backed startups. But this time there was going to be a twist, and this leads to my third chapter. Oh, look at that. I'm doing the Euro 3 instead of that. That's cool. Anyway, third chapter. I'm going to say third chapter so many times. I have dubbed the tricycle life. This was the realization that I was ready to become a dad. I was ready to become a husband, and I was really excited for this new chapter. And to me, this new chapter was a shift from the dream of wanting to start a company that would ultimately go public to wanting to have the most amount of time possible with my family, with my kids, and earn the most amount of money possible while working the least amount of time. And so that was the vision of the tricycle life: most amount of money possible, least amount of time invested. And I decided that starting a services company would be the way to go. So that's how Mattermade was born. Ultimately, Mattermade scaled to be number 81 on the Inc. 5000. We were the fastest growing company in Colorado in 2021. And I'm really proud of the wild and insane journey that led to the ups and downs. It wasn't all roses. It was definitely a hard fought battle to get to that place. And then right after we got there, the tech sector totally collapsed. This was 2022, and all of our clients were tech. So we went from $4.2 million in EBITDA a year to basically rebuilding the business from scratch. And, I'm again really proud to say that while the last couple of years from a burnout perspective were some of the most difficult I've ever dealt with, we made it back, and we are building again, and the business is growing again and profitable again. All these things that it takes a lot of one foot in front of the other, but you always make it out the other side if you stick with it. So to me, the tricycle life was all about optimizing my work schedule in a way that I could spend a ton of time with my family, a ton of time with my friends, a ton of time on the things that fire me up in life that aren't just business related, while also making as much money as possible and growing something that would fire me up and be just a fun third chapter. So we're talking about this period of burnout right after the crash of 22. Are we going to talk about it like the crash of 22? Is that too dramatic? I think it was a pretty dramatic time, maybe just for me. Anyway, the crash of 22. Back in the day, the crash of 22. So this was a period of time where, to be honest, I was in bad shape. I think a lot of people were in bad shape. I remember going downstairs, walking outside. It was summertime, and just looking up at the sun and sobbing. And that was a pretty regular occurrence, honestly. Like it wasn't just once, it was a lot. I would call, my mentors, and they would tell me the right things to tell someone who was crying at the sun. And that was some of the darkest times I've ever gone through as an entrepreneur, for sure. There's one kind of pivotal moment that I'll always remember, where we were downstairs I was with my wife and our young daughter at the time, and we were in this playpen, and I was crying, and I was just like, I don't want our daughter to see me like this. And I don't feel like I can provide for our family right now. And my wife said to me something again that it'll always stay with me. She was like, everything that we need is in this playpen right now. Woo. Maybe that's too personal. I don't know. You have to go through the hard times to have the good times. It kind of it keeps things into perspective. So, as hard as those times were, I'm really grateful for them. I think it's shaped who I am today as an entrepreneur. So anyway, lots of feelings. We're feeling them. This dark time led to a great advancement for me. I actually started another company while things were slow. So this is where No Boring Design was born. No Boring Design is my design agency. Mattermade is a performance marketing agency. We had these two really talented designers on the Mattermade team, and I wanted to make sure we could retain them. So I came up with this idea of, what if we spun them out, let them have their own design studio, where instead of needing to come to us for marketing plus design, you could just come for design. Mattermade could just be marketing, or could still be marketing plus design. And it was a hypothesis. I kind of built it out and was really excited about the idea of a totally different business model. Whereas Mattermade was much more expensive, annual contracts. No Boring Design was going to be the exact opposite. It was going to be monthly subscription paid through Stripe. It was going to be low price point, no contracts. And I liked the idea of this kind of yin and yang, where one of them could be successful while the other one isn't, or vice versa, and they could balance each other out, or just create more diversification. And what started off as like a weekend hackathon, where I asked our creative director to come up with a brand and a website design, and we would launch it on Monday. Well, it worked. We started adding customers much more quickly than I expected to. And today, No Boring Design and Mattermade are actually the same size, which boggles my mind, and has just been a ton of fun to experiment with. So here we are, present day. We've got Mattermade on one side, No Boring Design on the other. And I'm really excited to take y'all along for the journey. My commitment to you is I'm going to build No Boring Design in the open. I'm going to share all the details of the journey, the ups, the downs, our profit numbers, our revenue numbers, whatever it is that people want to know, I will share. And my hope is that this is, inspiring and helpful for other folks who are thinking about starting a company or already running a company. At the very least, knowing that you're not alone and you're going through the trenches with other folks who are right there with you, shovel in hand. So I hope you join me for the journey. I hope you subscribe, and there'll be more videos coming weekly. Whew. Man, I really went off the rails there for a second. It was definitely organic. Yeah. I just cry on demand for my YouTube channel. It's a talent of mine.